Do you ever wonder what really caused the iconic Elvis Presley and his stunning ex-wife?
In the quiet halls of Graceland, where memories linger in every corner, a hidden secret was waiting to be uncovered. Tucked inside a forgotten book lay an envelope sealed with time, a love letter from Elvis Presley that Priscilla had never seen. Its words carried the weight of his heart, revealing emotions he had never spoken aloud. When Priscilla finally read the letter, the strength she had carried for decades gave way, and she broke down in tears. The pain of the past collided with the tenderness of a love that had defined her life. This is not just a story about music or fame. It is about love, loss, and legacy. Join us as we uncover Elvis's hidden truth. Subscribe now and be part of this unforgettable journey. The discovery that shook Graceland. The air inside Graceland carried a sense of timelessness. Every room spoke of history. Every artifact whispered a fragment of Elvis Presley's extraordinary life. For decades, fans from across the globe had traveled to walk through those hallowed halls to feel closer to the king whose music changed the world. Yet even within a house so carefully preserved, secrets still lingered. Priscilla Presley, returning once more to the archives, never imagined that one discovery would shatter the quiet balance she had kept for years. It began innocently enough with a casual request to review old personal effects that had not been cataloged in years. Priscilla sifted through shelves lined with boxes and books, each marked with the faint touch of age. She opened one worn volume, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. It seemed ordinary at first, another relic of a man whose life had been preserved in countless objects. But nestled between the pages was something that immediately caught her eye, an envelope sealed and untouched, as though waiting patiently for its moment to be revealed. Her heart tightened as she lifted it from the book. The paper was fragile, the ink faded with time, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Elvis. She paused, staring at the envelope as though it carried the weight of the past she had both cherished and tried to move beyond. With trembling hands, she carefully opened it, revealing a letter that had been hidden for decades. The words inside were intimate and haunting. Elvis had written of love that endured despite the distance, of regrets that weighed heavily on his soul, and of longing that fame could never satisfy. He spoke of nights spent alone, surrounded by adoration yet consumed by loneliness. His words were not those of a superstar, but of a man stripped of glamour, yearning for something deeper, something lasting. For Priscilla, each line pierced her heart. She had known Elvis better than anyone, yet here was a side of him that even she had not fully seen. The letter carried his vulnerability, his unspoken confessions, and his quiet hope that love would survive the storms of fame and expectation. It was as though Elvis had reached out from beyond time, placing his soul into her hands. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the words with her fingertips. The discovery felt almost too heavy to bear. She remembered the years they had shared, the laughter, the arguments, the fragile bond strained by fame's relentless pull. Now, decades later, this letter revived those memories in raw and unfiltered detail. It was not only a message of love, but also of sorrow, a window into the pain that had followed Elvis behind the curtain of stardom. The room around her seemed to fade as she held the letter close. Graceland had always been a monument to his legacy, but in that moment it became a sanctuary of secrets revealed. The discovery was more than archival, it was deeply personal. For Priscilla, it was the rediscovery of a love that had shaped her life, and the painful reminder that Elvis's voice still lingered, speaking truths she had never before heard, echoes of a king's heart. The letter unfolded like a song never sung in public, its melody woven with honesty, regret, and longing. Elvis had written with a candor that few had ever witnessed. His words carried the weight of a man who had lived under the glare of spotlights, but who had struggled in silence when the curtains closed. For every roar of the crowd and every encore that shook the stage, there were nights of stillness when loneliness crept into his soul. The letter revealed those nights with painful clarity. He confessed how the pressures of fame had carved away at his peace. The endless tours, the constant attention, and the expectation to be larger than life had left him feeling trapped within his own legend. In the letter, he admitted that the applause sometimes echoed hollow and that behind the glittering costumes and the flashing bulbs, he often felt unseen as a man. He wrote that he longed for simplicity, for the comfort of love unclouded by duty and demand. Yet amid the heaviness of his confessions, Elvis's words carried tenderness. He wrote of Priscilla with affection that endured beyond distance and time. He spoke of moments they had shared that still gave him strength. He remembered her laughter, the quiet evenings when the world seemed far away, and the way her presence had given him a sense of belonging when fame had stripped so much away. In his words, his love for her was not bound by circumstance. It was an anchor, a reminder that even in his isolation he had someone whose heart was tied to his. The vulnerability within the letter painted a portrait of Elvis not as the king of rock and roll, but as a man struggling to balance two worlds. One was the world of fame, where every step was watched and every note dissected. The other was the world of human longing, where he yearned for love, peace, and understanding. The tension between the two worlds seeped through every line, exposing the quiet battles he fought in shadows. Priscilla read the letter with tears blurring her vision. She had lived beside him during those years, but seeing his pain written so openly struck her with new force. It was as though he had allowed his soul to breathe onto the page, finally unguarded. She realized that even she had not fully grasped the depth of his struggles, hidden behind the mask of charm and performance that he wore so well. The words echoed through Graceland like a voice returning from the past. They carried the sound of Elvis's heart, raw and unembellished, reminding the world that behind the legend stood a man who had battled loneliness and longed for love. The letter became more than paper and ink. It was a revelation, a confession, and a testament that even kings are not immune to the fragility of the human heart. It was Elvis, stripped of his crown, speaking in the voice of a man who had always been searching for peace. Priscilla's shattering realization. Priscilla's hands trembled as she held the fragile pages, the faded ink carrying words that pierced through the years as though Elvis had only written them yesterday. At first she read slowly, her eyes tracing the familiar handwriting with a cautious reverence. But as the meaning of his words sank in, her composure began to unravel. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks, each line striking a chord buried deep within her soul. The letter was more than a confession. It was a mirror reflecting the pain, the love, and the struggles that had once defined their lives together. Memories rushed over her like an unrelenting tide. She remembered the bright beginnings of their marriage, when love had been fresh and promises seemed eternal. She saw the joy of private moments, stolen glances, and laughter that had once filled the walls of Graceland. Yet intertwined with those tender recollections came the darker shadows, the nights of distance, the weight of fame, and the arguments born from exhaustion and absence. The letter forced her to relive not just the beauty but also the fractures that fame and pressure had carved into their bond. Her tears deepened as she came to the passages where Elvis wrote of regret. His words confessed the sorrow of not always being present, of letting the demands of his career overshadow the needs of the woman he loved. Though decades had passed, the pain of those years returned in raw clarity. It was as though she was standing once again in the silence of their home, waiting for him to come back from a world that had always demanded too much of him. The wounds she had buried so carefully over time opened wide. She had tried to protect herself from the memories of heartbreak, focusing instead on the happier times and on preserving his legacy for their daughter and for the world. Yet the letter gave voice to emotions she had never fully confronted. Elvis's confessions did not allow her to escape. They demanded that she face the truth of their marriage, both its light and its sorrow. Priscilla wept not only for the pain, but also for the tenderness. Reading his words reminded her that despite the struggles, the love they had shared was real and profound. The affection, though often strained by circumstance, had never been false. His handwriting carried the proof that he had felt as deeply as she had, that their story was not defined by its ending, but by the bond that had existed between them. As she laid the letter gently on her lap, her tears slowed, but her heart remained heavy. She knew she had uncovered something more powerful than an artifact. She had uncovered Elvis's voice, speaking from the past into her present, shattering her carefully guarded walls. The realization was both devastating and healing, forcing her to confront the truth she had long tried to bury, that their love had been both beautiful and broken, yet enduring in ways she could never deny. The silent strain of stardom. The legend of Elvis Presley was built on dazzling lights, roaring audiences, and the sound of music that defined a generation. To the world, he was untouchable, the king of rock and roll, whose voice could move millions and whose presence could command any stage. Yet behind that glittering image was a man often consumed by silence, trapped in a life that very few could truly understand. The letter Priscilla discovered revealed that truth with striking honesty, pulling back the curtain to show the quiet ache that fame had carved into him. Elvis wrote of the adoration that followed him everywhere, describing how it sometimes felt less like love and more like a cage. The endless demands of fans and the media left him little space to simply be himself. Even when surrounded by people, he admitted to feeling isolated, as though no one could reach past the legend to see the man within. Fame had elevated him to heights beyond imagination, but it had also locked him away, creating a barrier between his public self and the private soul yearning for peace. The letter spoke of nights spent awake in hotel rooms long after the applause had faded and the stage lights had gone dark. He confessed that the silence of those hours was often louder than the cheers, filling him with loneliness that no crowd could ease. The energy he poured into performances left him drained, and when the curtains closed, he faced emptiness that felt inescapable. These were the burdens he rarely admitted aloud, choosing instead to carry them within, where they grew heavier with each passing year. The strain of stardom also weighed on his relationships. He wrote of the distance fame created between himself and those he loved, including Priscilla. The constant travel, the press intrusion, and the impossibility of privacy eroded the intimacy they once shared. Elvis described how he longed for ordinary moments, simple evenings without the glare of attention, yet such moments had become almost impossible. The very career that had given him everything had also stolen the things he cherished most. For Priscilla, reading these confessions was devastating. She had witnessed the cost of his fame, yet the words on the page revealed depths of pain she had not fully known. The letter forced her to relive their struggles, the arguments born of distance, the exhaustion that shadowed his eyes, and the way his vulnerability hid beneath charm and charisma. It was as though Elvis had left her a mirror, reflecting not just his hidden pain, but also the silent battles that had shaped their marriage. The silent strain of stardom was not captured in photographs or performances. It existed in the quiet moments between shows, in the shadows of Graceland's rooms, and in the unspoken truths of a man who carried the weight of the world's adoration but longed for something far simpler. Through the letter, that hidden pain came alive, reminding Priscilla and the world that Elvis was not just a king, but also a man burdened by the crown of fame, the ghost of lost love. The words of the letter lingered in Priscilla's hands like whispers from another time. As she read each line, memories long buried rose to the surface, pulling her back into moments when love had been their anchor. She remembered the tenderness that defined their earliest days together, the small gestures of affection that carried more meaning than all the grandeur of fame. Elvis had once looked at her not as the world's icon, but as the young woman who had captured his heart. She recalled evenings at Graceland when laughter filled the rooms, when they could shut out the noise of the outside world and simply be two people in love. He would sit at the piano, his fingers moving gently over the keys as he played songs meant only for her ears. The world knew Elvis the performer, the magnetic king of rock and roll, but she knew Elvis the man who could make her laugh with a single expression or comfort her with the warmth of his embrace. The letter seemed to breathe life into those memories, as though Elvis's ghost had returned to remind her that his love never truly vanished. He wrote of longing for the simplicity of those shared moments, of regret for the times fame and distance pulled them apart, and of gratitude for the bond they had once built together. His words became echoes of a love that had shaped both their lives, a love that even separation and time could not erase. Priscilla's tears flowed freely as she clutched the pages. The letter was not merely a message from the past, it was a living reminder of what they had shared and what she had lost. She could almost hear his voice, the soft drawl filled with emotion, confessing feelings he had never spoken aloud. In her mind, she could see him standing once again in the dim light of Graceland's rooms, his presence as real as the ink on the page. What struck her most was the realization that beneath the struggles, beneath the heartbreak, the love between them had never disappeared. It had been buried under fame's demands and the pressures of expectation, but it had endured. The ghost of lost love was not haunting in sorrow, but illuminating in truth, reminding her that what they shared was genuine, unshakable, and eternal. Her thoughts drifted back to their youth, when everything seemed possible, when the future stretched before them like an open road. She remembered the first time he had confided his fears to her, the first time she realized that behind the stage persona was a man craving understanding. That memory now connected seamlessly with the words on the page, affirming that his love had always been honest even when life complicated its expression. The letter closed with words of tenderness that resonated deeply in her heart. Though he was gone, though decades had passed, the spirit of their love remained alive. For Priscilla, the letter was not a reopening of wounds, but a resurrection of love, once thought silenced. Elvis's ghost spoke not in shadows, but in light, reminding her that true love does not end with absence. It lingers, it breathes, and it continues to shape the lives of those left behind. Secrets within Graceland. Graceland has always been more than just a mansion. It is a shrine, a museum, and a place where the memory of Elvis Presley continues to live. Every corner of the estate is filled with relics of his extraordinary life, from glittering jumpsuits to gold records lining the walls. Yet for all its careful preservation, Graceland still holds secrets, and the discovery of the hidden letter proved that even decades later, new pieces of Elvis's story could still surface. Archivists who worked closely with Graceland's vast collection revealed how the letter had remained concealed for so long. Decades of cataloging had ensured that most of Elvis's belongings were accounted for, yet the enormity of the collection made it nearly impossible to examine every detail. Items were stored in trunks, boxes, and cabinets, many untouched since the day they were first placed there. Among them was a chest of personal effects locked and left undisturbed, a silent guardian of memories that no one had yet uncovered. When archivists eventually opened the chest, they found a mix of documents, photographs, and keepsakes. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary. The materials appeared to be familiar mementos, already known to historians and fans. But tucked inside one of the worn books was the envelope that changed everything. It was fragile with age, its edges yellowed and brittle, yet its secrecy had preserved it from fading completely. Within its folds lay the love letter Elvis had written, a piece of history that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. The discovery sparked an immediate question. If one letter had remained undiscovered for so long, what else might still be hidden within Graceland's walls? The archivists admitted that even with years of work, the sheer scale of Elvis's belongings meant there could be more personal treasures yet to be found. His life had been fast, chaotic, and filled with constant change, and in that whirlwind, countless items were set aside without thorough review. For Priscilla, the resurfacing of the letter was both heartbreaking and illuminating. She realized that Elvis had left behind more than just music and memories. He had left traces of his private world scattered across the estate, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to look closely enough. The letter was not simply an artifact, but a doorway into his soul, revealing thoughts he had chosen not to voice. It reminded her that the man she had loved was still speaking through the possessions he left behind. The revelation also reignited curiosity among fans and historians. What other secrets might lie within trunks and boxes never fully examined? Could there be more letters, more confessions, or even messages meant for those closest to him? The idea that Graceland still guarded untold stories stirred excitement and reverence. It proved that even decades after his passing, Elvis was not finished speaking to the world. Secrets within Graceland are not merely objects, they are echoes of a man whose life remains larger than legend. The hidden letter became a symbol of how history continues to reveal itself piece by piece, ensuring that Elvis Presley's story will never truly be complete, always leaving something new for the world to discover. The public's endless devotion. When news of the hidden letter finally reached the outside world, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Fans who had carried Elvis in their hearts for decades felt as if he had spoken to them once more from beyond the grave. The words he had written, filled with vulnerability, longing, and unguarded emotion, reminded the public that the king was not only a legend, but also a man of flesh and spirit. Newspapers, magazines, and television networks raced to share the discovery, and within hours, the story spread across continents and oceans. In cities across America and far beyond, candlelight vigils began to form outside Graceland. Fans, young and old, gathered, some carrying flowers, others holding photographs of Elvis close to their chests. Songs he had once performed echoed softly through the night air as people stood united, celebrating not only the music, but also the man who had given them a piece of his soul. The letter had reignited something powerful, reminding everyone that Elvis was more than an icon of the past. He remained alive in the devotion of millions. What moved fans most was the vulnerability revealed in the letter. Many had idolized Elvis for his charm, his power on stage, and his seemingly unshakable presence. Yet the words on the page revealed a man who battled loneliness and struggled with the weight of fame. To his admirers, this made him more human, more relatable, and more beloved than ever before. The king of rock and roll was no longer distant. He was a man whose heart beat with the same fears and desires as those who adored him. The devotion was not confined to America. In London, Paris, Tokyo, and Sydney, fans organized impromptu gatherings, lighting candles and playing his songs in open squares. Radio stations across the globe interrupted programming to replay his greatest hits and read excerpts from the letter aloud. Documentaries were rushed into production, while newspapers ran special editions reflecting on Elvis not just as an entertainer, but as a man whose emotions still had the power to stir the world. Across generations, the reaction was the same. Older fans who had once seen Elvis perform live felt as though a lost part of their youth had returned. Younger generations, many of whom had only known him through stories, films, and records, found themselves drawn even closer to his spirit. Social media flooded with tributes, with countless voices declaring that his words still had the power to heal, inspire, and unite. The discovery bridged time, proving that his influence was not bound by age or era. Graceland itself became a beacon for those seeking connection. Crowds swelled at the gates, leaving behind candles, letters, and handwritten notes addressed to Elvis. Fans spoke of feeling his presence more strongly than ever, as though the letter had opened a window into his soul that had long been sealed. The devotion was not only for the man who had lived, but also for the spirit that continued to shape lives long after his passing. The endless devotion of the public reminded the world of Elvis's unique power. He was not only a performer but also a symbol of love, resilience, and humanity. His music had already built a bridge between him and his fans, but the hidden letter created a bond even deeper. It gave the world a glimpse of his heart, and in doing so, reignited the flame of admiration that had never truly gone out. Elvis remained the king not only of music but of memory, forever uniting millions in devotion. Priscilla's healing journey. For Priscilla Presley, the discovery of the letter was both heartbreaking and strangely comforting. At first, the words had pierced her with sorrow, opening wounds she thought had long healed. The pain of remembering the struggles of their marriage and the eventual separation threatened to overwhelm her. Yet as she read and reread the lines, a shift began to take place. Slowly, the letter transformed from a source of grief into a gift of healing, one final message from Elvis that spoke directly to her heart. She saw in his words not only loneliness and regret, but also the enduring truth of his love. Elvis had written with an honesty he rarely revealed in life, and that honesty became a powerful affirmation. No matter how much fame had tested them or how often distance had divided them, their bond had been real. His confessions reminded her that what they had shared was not defined by public opinion or overshadowed by the pressures of celebrity. It had been a genuine love, flawed and fragile, yet strong enough to survive even in memory. Priscilla recalled the years after their divorce when doubts often crept into her mind. Had their relationship been too consumed by the chaos of fame to have truly mattered? Had the love she once believed in been overshadowed by the legend of Elvis Presley? The letter silenced those questions. In his handwriting, she found proof that his love had not been an illusion. It had endured beyond the stage lights, beyond the applause, and even beyond their separation. The sorrow she felt began to give way to gratitude. Gratitude for the years they had shared, for the laughter that had once filled their home, and for the way Elvis had made her feel seen in a world that constantly tried to blur her identity into his. The letter became a bridge between the past and the present, closing the distance that time and loss had created. It allowed her to feel close to him once more, not as a figure adored by millions, but as the man who had once been her husband. This healing was not immediate. It unfolded slowly, in quiet moments when she allowed herself to sit with the letter and embrace the emotions it stirred. Each time she revisited it, she discovered new layers, finding peace where once there had been only regret. It was as though Elvis himself was guiding her through the pain, offering her closure that had eluded her for decades. Priscilla's healing journey also carried meaning beyond her own heart. She realized that the letter was not only for her, but for everyone who had loved Elvis. It was a testament that the king of rock and roll had been, above all else, a man capable of deep and enduring love. Sharing his words would not only honor his memory, but also allow the world to see him as she had once seen him. In the end, the letter did more than reopen wounds. It offered healing. It reminded Priscilla that love, even when tested by fame, divorce, and tragedy, remains eternal. Elvis's words became her comfort, her closure, and her proof that their love story would forever endure. Elvis's legacy eternal. As the story reached its conclusion, the letter that had once been hidden in silence found its rightful place in the light. Priscilla made the decision to safeguard the fragile pages, understanding that they were more than personal confessions. They were pieces of Elvis's soul, preserved for generations to come. With care and reverence, the letter was placed among the most cherished artifacts at Graceland, displayed as a symbol of truth, vulnerability, and love. Visitors who entered the museum would no longer see only the king of rock and roll. They would also glimpse the man behind the legend, the man whose heart had spoken through ink and paper. The display was arranged with quiet dignity. The letter, framed under protective glass, rested beside photographs that captured Elvis in moments of tenderness with Priscilla. Fans who came to Graceland stood before it in awe, reading the words that had once reduced her to tears. Some wept openly, others whispered softly, as though in conversation with the king himself. The letter did not simply tell a story. It invited every visitor to feel the depth of a love that had survived fame, divorce, and tragedy. For Priscilla, the act of sharing the letter was both painful and liberating. It had once been hers alone, a private glimpse into Elvis's innermost thoughts. Yet she knew his legacy did not belong to her alone. Elvis had always belonged to the world, and the letter was part of that inheritance. By offering it to Graceland, she ensured that his words would live on, not hidden in a drawer but alive in the hearts of those who came to honor him. The closing message of the documentary became clear. Elvis was not only a cultural icon or the king of music who defined a generation. He was also a man who felt deeply, who wrestled with loneliness, and who loved with intensity. His story was more than glittering performances and record-breaking hits. It was a story of humanity, of vulnerability, and of a love story with Priscilla that continues to inspire. The letter brought these truths to life, reminding the world that even legends carry fragile hearts. The devotion of fans did not waver. If anything, the revelation of the letter deepened their admiration. They saw Elvis not just as a star who entertained, but as a man who gave pieces of himself to those he loved. His legacy became eternal not only because of his music, but also because of the emotions that lived on through his words. The letter became a timeless artifact, proof that Elvis's spirit still spoke, still reached across generations, and still united millions under the banner of love. As the documentary closed, the camera lingered on the letter resting safely within Graceland. Priscilla's voice echoed with calm resolve, reminding viewers that Elvis may be gone, but his love and his humanity endure. His legacy is eternal, not only in the records he left behind, but in the timeless story of a man whose heart still beats through the memory of those who loved him. Elvis Presley's story has always been larger than life, yet within the pages of one hidden letter we find not the king, but the man. His words reveal the weight of loneliness, the cost of fame, and a love that survived beyond time. For Priscilla, the letter was both a wound and a healing, a reminder that their bond was never broken, only reshaped by life's trials. For the world, it is proof that Elvis was not only a legend of music, but a soul who felt as deeply as he sang. Graceland now protects this treasure, inviting us to remember that Elvis's true legacy is not just in the records he sold, but in the emotions he shared. His voice may have fallen silent, but his spirit speaks still. Subscribe now to uncover more untold truths and keep alive the love story that will never fade.